Podcast. How are you, Coach Josh Wood?
Doing great.
So great to have you on, and particularly a Tassie, someone from Hobart, Tasmania. So it's delight to have you on because I've got a fair cohort of listeners on the Me and My Health Up that are residing in Tasmania. So shout out to them, and yeah, it's great to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. For the listeners, I'd love you to you take the listeners on your journey as to how you've arrived at what you're doing today.
Oh boy, how long is the show again? Because that could take a while. I'll keep it short because it's yeah. There's many paths and many things that kind of took me on the journey to where I am here now today. Um, so for all the Australians out there that are like, this guy doesn't sound Tasmanian. I grew up in Minnesota in the U.S., so I'm U.S. born. Moved to Australia in 2008. I was 19 years old. Uh, Basically, I work as a primarily online health and fitness coach. And it's a weird path that took me here because like I left my home country and the place I grew up when I was 18 and went abroad and ended up in Australia when I met an Australian girl over in Scotland. And we moved here in 2008. And it's just such a funny thing. Like you look back and you're like, oh man, things could have been so different so many different times, but you kind of end up where you need to end up. And it all started when I was about, I think I was 17, maybe. I was like a big time computer nerd, working in a computer shop doing repairs and software reinstalls and that kind of thing. And one day I was just like, this isn't right. This is not the path I want to take. It was strange because I still remember it in my head. Like the one day I was just like, this isn't going to cut it. And it was sort of a understanding that I needed to be more active and proactive in my life, in my health. And the direction I decided to take was like, well, I need to be more physically capable. I need to learn how to do kickboxing. And I started Googling, and there was no kickboxing in my town because it's not a big town. It's like, okay, well, that didn't work out. So I found an MMA gym with this Brazilian guy who had some mats set up in the back of a family run Irish boxing gym. And I started doing MMA and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And I pursued that when I went traveling, went backpacking through the UK, trained in a few places over in Ireland and Scotland when I was over there. Uh, Met my future wife, moved to Australia, continued to train. And after a few years, I was just like, I need to know more. And so I was like, okay, how do I learn more? How do I learn more about the body? How do I learn more about how it actually works? Because this is great. I love being active. I love being around active people. I was like, but how does all this work? And so I decided to pursue a career in massage, and I did that. Went to a massage school, graduated. I don't even know when, 2011 maybe, 2012. I was teaching that course in Melbourne, Cert 4 and diploma in massage. I started doing my fitness qualifications, qualified as the PT, started working out of a boxing gym, and then went to university to do my Bachelor of Health Science with a major in traditional Chinese medicine. Because I always had this interest in traditional styles of health, which probably comes from the martial arts background. I started doing that and slowly got out of massage and slowly, like, as I was finishing my qualification, I was like, man, I don't like being in clinics. I don't like being in this place where people just come for a quick fix, even though it's kind of hippy dippy. And the people come in, they're like, oh, I don't want anything to do with Western medicine. I'm like, okay, well, here's all these lifestyle things you can do to make things better. Let's get some more sunlight. Let's eat some real food. Let's do some exercise. And like, nah, I don't want to do that. Can you just like give me some herbal magic or some tablets or something? And I'm like, that's literally the same way of treating things. And so I was like, I'm done with this. I'm tired of this style of working with people. I want to work with people who are ready to do work. And so then I went all in fitness. And I've been in gyms for the last decade, and I eventually was like, I can't work with any more people. I can't reach enough people. I got in this thing where it's like, you come in for 1 hour a week, we're not going to accomplish anything. I need to be in your pocket every day. And so I shifted everything to an online platform where I can actually be with clients 7 days a week, getting them to tick boxes around their nutrition and steps and stress management and exercise. And it's been game changing. But it all started because one day I was like, I'm tired of computers. I want to learn how to kickbox. And then 15 years later, I'm here.
Back to the computer.
Back to the computer.
Yeah.
It's such a funny thing. It's like I went into fitness because I like to be active and want to work with active people, and then I turned it into a desk job.
Wow, but you're certainly serving people's health needs in a holistic way. And you mentioned Chinese medicine, and the I guess you sort of warm to that traditional approach. What is it? What is it about the traditional approach that really connects with you?
Originally, it was this idea that humans are by default healthy. Every animal is. And what keeps us and all animals healthy is living in accordance with what we need. And what we need as humans to be healthy has not changed since we first came into existence. So I was like, I wanted to look into older styles of health and wellness. And Chinese medicine is very holistic. It's not something I really use much, but it does sort of shape my worldview of lifestyle and health because it's one of those very few total systems. So as part of that qualification, I was trained as an acupuncturist, an herbalist. So this idea of like, plant medicine, nutrition, I'm very, very interested in nutrition. I kind of went more that way with further qualifications. But this idea that, there's a lot of stuff available in nature that we can use to help us that exercise and like there's a whole dietary protocol with traditional Chinese medicine that was very interesting to me, and then like massage, and they have a whole exercise system as well with things like qigong and tai chi. You got massage, you got needling, you've got nutrition, you've got lifestyle stuff, and it's like okay, you got this whole package that in Western medicine and Western health, everything is isolated. Oh, you want to look at your nutrition? Go to that one nutrition person. You want to look at exercise? Go to that exercise person. And everything is so pigeonholed. And I was like, nah, like there's been systems of health that incorporated everything. And although they might be 5,000 years old and there's stuff in there that we're not going to do now, we know isn't going to work. I wanted kind of a foundation of looking at people as a whole. And so I kind of took that and it's like, okay, this is an interesting foundation. Yeah, a lot of stuff I'm not really going to use. I don't want to work in clinical medicine anymore. Uh, I want to work with activity because movement is required for health. And there's a bit of a foundation with that, but I'd have a very Western approach when it comes to exercise, but I wanted to figure out how to incorporate things. And so it kind of became a jumping board to where I went to strength and conditioning and started doing more, gym-based stuff and then incorporating that with nutrition and then looking at how we manage stress and an importance on sleep, whole foods diet, that kind of thing. So I kind of took this underlying holistic framework and then applied modern Western knowledge on top of that.
I was just thinking as you were sharing that approach that we're at the end of the year, so it's that festive season. People are out, celebrating the year and getting together and connecting and doing a lot of, I guess, enjoying themselves, so to speak, and enjoying the
Yeah.
food, enjoying the drink, and probably doing a bit less exercise and just busy, meeting people and catching up. And so, but on the back of their mind, they're thinking, okay, I'm doing this now, but next year I'm going to get back into it. And I was thinking, based on your background and this holistic approach, where do you suggest people start? Like, what's your go-to get the person starting on their health journey or that New Year's resolution?
I mean, that's a tough one because it's very individual. It depends where a person is in their life and what they can actually do. Like I got two young kids. I know people with like a handful of young kids. Their capacity for taking on new and challenging things is much more limited than a 20-year-old guy that lives at home, has no bills, no family, no responsibilities. They can do everything. And anything that they don't do is because of an excuse. But it really does depend on where people are at and what their capacity is. But my general thing is always start with the smallest possible step first. And usually that's steps, that's walking. For so many people, because life is so sedentary, the focus I have is often on just move, walk, walk. And so many people use time as an excuse. I don't have time to do any exercise. I can get you an extra 3.5 hours of exercise a week. Easy. Guarantee you can do it. You know how? You walk for 10 minutes after every meal. 3 meals, 30 minutes a day, 3.5 hours a week. I guarantee you can do that. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how many kids you have, what responsibilities you have. You can walk for 30 minutes a day. And that just ends up being like the small, thin edge of the wedge that opens up more things. Because once you start doing more, you start feeling better, your energy levels improve. But more so, I think it's a mindset thing. Oh, look, I did something. I took control of some aspect and improved my life. And that's addictive. That gets people moving.
That's a fantastic way to kickstart things. Is really simple. After the meal, just go for a walk, and you generally feel like moving. Certainly I do after eating. I feel like moving and allowing the just getting the body moving after having a sedentary meal. So I think that's certainly an easy thing for the listener to get started with. In terms of nutrition, so you mentioned you've got a love of nutrition. You've learnt the traditional, the Chinese way that how they see nutrition, and you've obviously overlaid that with the more modern Western nutritional elements. So, in terms of where someone, what do you recommend how they should start out in terms of changing their diet or correcting their diet?
Again, depends. I would say that 99.9% of people need more protein. The average person who's not really paying attention to their food, or because the sort of like the current trend in nutrition is towards like plant-based stuff, which usually means people who don't get enough protein are going to get less protein. And once we get protein sorted, everything else falls into place so much easier. Your whole body is made out of protein. Your hair, skin, nails, your bones, the compound that makes bones rigid is collagen. It's a protein. Your ability to interact with the world, especially as we get older, requires muscle, and muscle is made out of protein. So once we hit protein needs, things tend to sort themselves out a bit better, and I think that's the first place people should start.
And have you got a nice golden gem in relation to incorporating more protein into your diet? Obviously, you mentioned that plant-based is, going to make it more challenging. Have you got some simple steps?
Yeah. So generally speaking, if we're not going to do sort of like weighing and measuring, some people are very averse to the idea of weighing and measuring food. I like to nerd out a bit, and periodically I'll go through like what I call a calibration period, where I'll literally weigh and measure all of my food to know exactly what I'm taking in consistently for about 10 days, once or twice a year. That gives me an idea of portion sizes and whatnot. So you could do something like that. But if you want to make things easier and more intuitive, I take what I call a proportional eating approach, which means you look at your hand, you look at the size, shape, thickness of your palm. You want to eat at least one dense protein portion, about that big, with every meal. So when I say dense protein, I mean very nutrient dense, very protein dense, meaning it's got a lot of protein in relation to total amount of calories. So something like lean meats, something like low fat Greek yogurt, something like fish. Like they tend to be leaner. There's not a lot of extra calories. It's just a chunk of protein and usually some fat soluble vitamins. Very satiating, pretty low on the calorie side. Because in general, across the world, the biggest issue we have is not hunger anymore. The biggest issue we have is obesity. 1 billion people worldwide are obese, and that's really a condition of being undernourished and overfed. So if we can get more nutrients and more nourishing with our diet, consuming less total amount of energy, it makes people generally healthier. So at least one palm portion of dense protein foods with each meal as a starter. And so basing your meal selection and your portions off of protein and then filling up the rest of your plate is a really good starting point, because my approach to changes in nutrition are generally additive. I want you to add in a certain amount of high protein foods. I want you to add in a certain amount of vegetables. I want you to add in a certain amount of carbohydrates or fats or whatever it is. And as we stair step this over weeks or months until it becomes intuitive and you no longer have to count everything, you slowly realize, a lot of the junk I was eating doesn't fit. I'm not hungry for it anymore because I have to add these things in. And excuse me, in the long run, it doesn't make a huge difference whether you do that or a subtractive approach. Stop eating this, stop eating that, eat less of this. But that is harder for people to get into from a mindset perspective. Everybody's like, I don't want to give up my favorite foods. They're probably not going to be your favorite foods in 6 months when you realize that you can actually feel good eating a different way. But if we add stuff in step by step, that slowly pushes out the nonsense in our diet. And we start to feel better and have more energy and not be craving junk all the time.
And in terms of Chinese medicine, they've there's a focus around the energetics of the food and also timing of the food. So, what do you suggest to your clients around working with that?
Honestly, like I said, I don't do a ton with the Chinese medicine framework anymore. Um, I think that the framework around eating is generally good from a health perspective. It will keep you healthy, but I try to frame stuff in terms of performance and optimization. How can we get the most out of you? Chinese medicine really tries to make things good for digestion. It tries to bias things towards being easy to digest. So everything is cooked. So there is no raw greens and salads and that kind of thing. All vegetables, even fruits, they recommend that you stew them or gently simmer them and break them down because that makes it easier to digest. And so the idea with Chinese medicine is like, things are easier to digest. We eat whole foods, we try to eat more balanced, but I find that it can also cause people who are quite active to not get enough of certain nutrients, in particular, again, the protein side of stuff. You can, um, but it's not a diet that I've found to be real conducive to an active lifestyle. I find it can be very good for people who are ill, especially with chronic illnesses, and you start focusing on really nourishing whole foods. You get really invested in the cooking process and involved with really easy to digest foods like soups, stews, congees, porridges, that kind of thing. And people who have a lot of chronic illnesses or especially digestive issues can get a lot of benefit there. But because most of the people I work with are just trying to make things more convenient and be healthy, that can be it can really require a lot of investment in the process because it's like, all right, well, you need a certain amount of these spices. You need to make sure you're not eating too many hot things, but you need to have warm things, energetically speaking. And there's a lot more work to be done there. It's something I'd look at for people who have the kind of time required or, again, chronic illness. But people that I work with are mostly just really busy parents. And it's like, how do I make things easier? It's like, okay, well, this is how we batch up a whole bunch of protein portions and veggies. And I'd rather you eat raw veggies than no veggies. It's like easier to buy a bag of salad than it is to stew a bunch of carrots.
And in terms of timing of food, do you focus or have a view on chrononutrition?
Somewhat, somewhat. Again, it's individual. Again, it's really based on like what the person is trying to do. So I try to take the smallest step required first and then stack those. And so this process I call T&T, focusing on tiny noticeable things. Because if you got a mountain in your life that you're trying to remove, whether it's your inability to stop eating chocolate or drinking wine or literally a mountain you're trying to climb, the way you move a mountain is with T&T, focusing on the little things you can do each day. And so when it comes to timing, I focus on that more with the athletes that I work with. And the type of athletes that I work with are what we call tactical athletes, people who are military, police, prison guards, that kind of thing. Then I'll look at that more because that's more of a performance thing. The most important timing thing that I work with people is usually breakfast. Now, I don't think breakfast is required. Do I think it's the most important meal of the day? No. But if you're not able to get enough nutrients across the day, if you're not able to hit your protein goals, and you're not eating breakfast, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Start your day off with a bunch of protein, and I hear this every single time. Every time. I'm not really hungry for breakfast. Like, yeah, but you're eating half the protein you need just to recover daily. So you're going to be compromising something. You're going to compromise your immune system. You're going to compromise your energy levels, something. You got to get that protein up. I just want you to get 30 grams of protein for breakfast. 2 weeks later, like, wow, I'm not craving a bunch of junk at 10:30 in the morning. I'm not sleepy at 3 o'clock. It's like, yeah, because you were undernourishing yourself. So again, focusing on these tiny things that we can do first. And breakfast, as far as timing, it just makes it easier to get your nutrients across the day. So I'm not super set on those things because I know some people, like, I can't eat late in the day. Like if I have a lot of, again, high protein in the evening, I get crazy dreams and night sweats. And from a TCM perspective, Chinese medicine perspective, you shouldn't be eating a lot in the evening anyway. But I know some people who do really well. And they're like, unless I have, a good sized dinner, I don't sleep well. It's like, great. We're going to go with that because that's you and you're unique. And sort of as a side tangent here, the Chinese medicine thing, it's really designed to be based on the individual. And a lot of the data that comprises the system of traditional Chinese medicine is based on a very specific either time period or genetic code. It's Chinese medicine. We're looking at a very distinct group of people who grew up in a very distinct area, and they're going to have different nutritional needs and capabilities. And we see this with when we start looking more into nutrigenomics and looking at like what do certain genes tell us about what a person needs for nutrition. So I kind of take it as, you know, uh, an interesting base level that works well for some people. But again, I have to see what works for the individual before I make recommendations. But if you're not getting enough food, if your training or performance is suffering, then we start looking at timing. Like, well, when did you eat last? Oh, I ate 6 hours ago. And then you went out and tried to run 10K. Of course, you're going to feel like crap. Let's fix that. So looking at where things are lacking and then adjusting timing based on that.
And you've mentioned a number of times that you work with time poor parents. And so I'm really keen to explore that and health and how they can incorporate or find the time. I assume you've got some easy steps forward around nutrition, exercise. So have you got some tips that you recommend on a consistent basis to time poor parents?
Well, you know, I'm a time poor parent. So, the things that I give people are usually things that I found that have worked well for me or people in similar situations. Uh, and again, it's just always coming back to the same thing. Do the smallest thing first and do it consistently before you add more to it. And what I often see is that the reason that so many people put off focusing on their health and put off focusing on their fitness and how they feel is because they are inundated with information. There's too much. Every time you talk to someone about their health, like, I don't have time to go to the gym or do supplements or get workout clothes or whatever it is. They think there's so many things you have to do. And it's like, well, what are you wearing right now? Jeans and a t-shirt. Do you walk around with your kids? Yeah. Okay, keep walking. Do that. You don't need special clothes. You don't need special time. You need to integrate it with your kids. You need to figure out ways to increase activity in the smallest possible way consistently. Because we're not looking at fixing things today. We're not looking at fixing things tomorrow. We're looking at taking that step today, taking another step tomorrow. So that in 6 months, a year, you're living a different life, but it starts off with one step at a time. And so when we're dealing with time poor individuals, you can't do everything. You have to compromise. And I tell this to new parents too. I tell this to people who are like, oh, what do I need to do when I have, kids on the way? It's like, figure out what's most important, dial that in now, because it's going to be a million times harder when you have kids. And then when you have kids, you're going to realize what was really important. Because you won't have the time or the energy to do anything but the basics for quite a while. And that usually means things like just getting some sunlight, getting outside in the mornings, or at least once a day, walking around with your kids, showing them stuff, modeling good behavior and good habits around food. This is what I eat, so that's what my kids are going to eat. And just really just thinking smallest. Do you need to do everything? Do you need to worry about getting your kids, finding care for them, getting a gym membership, having all your special workout clothes, buying all these supplements? No. You can do some squats with a baby on your shoulder. We can stack stuff. You make coffee in the morning? Great. I want you to do squats while the coffee's brewing. It's like, what's your baby eating? Great. Why aren't you eating the same thing? Or the other way around. Like, what are you eating? Why is your baby not eating that? If you wouldn't feed it to them, why are you feeding it to yourself? If they don't have teeth, blend it up. They'll eat it that way. Like we do that all the time. But just like stop overwhelming yourself. Stop trying to do everything. Just do one thing. Take control of one thing. A lot of the people that I work with, like they just have a pair of dumbbells in their living room, and it doesn't take much. Like I had a guy that I worked with last year. He signed on for a year, and his thing was like he was very overweight, and he wants to have kids. And what we know about epigenetics is that if you are very overweight or obese, you're more likely to have children that are. But if you get rid of that extra weight, even if you were obese most of your life, but you get leaner before having kids, your kids are less likely to become obese. So we can change the outcomes for our children. And so I've had a few dads in the last couple of years that are like, I want to have kids, but I need to get in shape. I'm like, I got you. But then this guy, he's like, I signed up for a year. I need to lose a bunch of weight. And in 1 year, he lost 30 kilos. This is a young guy. He's in his mid 20s. And he lost 30 kilos. And you know how I did it? Primarily walking around with a backpack with water bottles in it. We got him to the gym once or twice a week, sometimes 3 times towards the end, based on his schedule. But the number one thing was just managing food and walking, and then increasing weight on walking. And my background, I worked as a wilderness guide for a bunch of years, and I've worked with a lot of people in that industry. And walking around with weight is incredibly demanding. When I was working as a guide, I'd burn 5,000 calories a day. So I know how it's wild. You can't maintain weight. And it's amazing how effective just walking and slowly putting more water bottles in your backpack can be. You don't need equipment. If you have a backpack, we'll get you fit. If you have a little space in your room, we'll get you fit. But we want to simplify. The number one piece of advice I have for all parents out there is simplify. I could have just said that, but I said too much.
That was that was very insightful. You've shared a lot, and I appreciate that. And that's what I took away was just simplify. Find the easiest step and take that. In terms of, you mentioned also a lot of parents, particularly with newborns or just starting a family, that overwhelm in terms of there's so much on your plate and
Oh
so
yeah.
little time, so that it brings about more stress in your life. And it's probably, I've certainly found parenthood the busiest or the stressfulest I've ever been. So what are your tips for helping parents to navigate that stressful time?
Simplify. The number one thing I focus on with young parents is sleep. Everything gets worse when you don't have sleep, and guess what? You're not going to get with kids, with babies especially. Sleep. Um, my oldest son didn't sleep through the night for 18 months. My youngest son, who's just over a year old now, is on that same path. He hasn't slept through the night ever. Uh, and so we're waiting for the 18-month mark and hoping it works. But, sleep. And the biggest reframe you can give yourself is this idea that you need all your sleep at once. Think of sleep on a 24-hour schedule. If you can get 8 hours across 24 hours, you're going to live. That means if you get 4 at night and you pick up a couple naps later, when the baby sleeps, you sleep, you're going to be fine. So reframing the sleep thing as a 24-hour schedule, and then just understanding that that needs to be the priority. If you were an athlete before that, you're going to need to take some time to sleep because otherwise everything's going to fall apart. And when you're tired, you get more stressed. When you're tired and you're stressed, your cortisol goes up. You have cravings for sweet things. You make bad dietary choices. You tend to eat lots of junk. You tend to be reaching for the wine or the beer more regularly. And this is where the dad bod comes from. And it's insidious. It just slowly creeps up on you because your body's saying, I need something. And I'm trying to get this thing through food. And if we look at this ancestrally, we crave sweet things. You might be able to find some berries. You might be able to find some roots and tubers you can roast up. And so if you're like reaching for some roast pumpkin and carrots, good for you. But people aren't doing that. So if we can just mitigate the stimulus that leads to the cravings, you're going to be better. And the best thing you can do is sleep. Helps with stress, helps with cravings, helps with recovery, helps with mood. Just simplify, focus on sleep, think of it as a 24-hour thing instead of just at night, and it will help you survive.
Absolutely. I certainly found, well, I actually never drank coffee before I began. So once I
Really?
became, So once I became a parent, I just couldn't get through the day without it. So my children have made me a coffee addict as a result of.
See, I, growing up in the U.S., coffee is part of everyday life, and
Okay.
my parents owned a business in the coffee industry and wholesale. So I've been around coffee since I was born, and it's like it's in my blood, and having kids didn't change that. It probably made it worse though.
In terms of your holistic approach, have we missed anything that we should discuss?
I mean, really, like the big aspects to being healthy are going to be, exercise, nutrition, lifestyle. And nutrition and exercise should be part of your lifestyle if you're doing it well. And when we look at things holistically, the main thing here is that we're looking at the big picture. Eating junk food once a week, having a glass of wine, having a glass of beer, having some sugar, or whatever, none of those things in isolation is a bad thing. When we look at health holistically, we're looking at the big picture. And the body needs stress. It needs a certain level of stress to adapt. And this is where I really sort of departed from Chinese medicine, where it frames everything, all stress, as being damaging. But what we know is that there's a process called hormesis, which means you adapt to stress and get stronger. That's how exercise works. That's how potentially some aspects of nutrition work. We need certain stresses that we then overcome and become stronger. And so any of these habits that we think are, quote, bad or detrimental, oh, I can't eat that food because it's bad food. No, it's bad if it becomes part of the lifestyle. It's not bad if it's a treat. It's not bad if it's in isolation. And so the big thing with holism is that we're looking at the overall trends, not the isolated incidents. So you can remove a lot of nutritional and food dogma. You can remove a lot of puritanical ideas around good and bad foods when you actually take a more holistic approach. I don't believe in good and bad foods. I believe in good and bad trends. I believe in things being more or less beneficial for you, or more or less in alignment with your goals. And that's really what holism is. Do you need to train 7 days a week? Not if it makes your life awful. Not if you can't recover from it. If you train 1 day a week and you're like, oh, it's not enough. Well, if it fits your life, it makes you feel good, you're generally healthy, that's a good thing. So there's no hard and fast rules when we look at things holistically. It's looking at the overall trends and then the outcomes.
Yeah, I love that insight that you shared. That it's not fixating on that treat that you've had, and then think that you've been so bad, and then beat yourself up, and then feel worse, and then wanting to eat more of the treat to make you feel better, and sort of that real vicious
Yes.
cycle. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's such great wisdom that you shared. I really appreciate it, and holistic. I love the holistic approach. So there's plenty of people out there I know that are thinking, well, I want to get healthier in the new year, and I want to find that easy step. So how can the listeners best connect with you?
Well, you can come visit me in Hobart. That's fine. But otherwise, online, you can find my website, strongforlife.online, which is my website that has all my free resources like the like an adult guide, the beginner gym guide. I got lots of free resources, lots of podcast episodes, so you can get a bunch of understanding around how I work. But strongforlife.online is my website for Strong for Life online coaching. And if you just want to get in touch and see what I'm up to, you can find me on Instagram, Coach Josh Wood. If you just Google Coach Josh Wood, I show up on pretty much every platform. So it's either Coach Josh Wood or strongforlife.online.
Fantastic. And I'll certainly incorporate those links in the show notes to make it even easier for the listeners. So just wanted
Thank you.
to express my appreciation for coming on the show, putting aside your time and sharing your wisdom on holistic health. So thank you so much, Coach Josh Wood.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to the listeners, and particularly those in Hobart. You've probably really, it's a delight to have someone from your area. So reach out to Coach Josh Wood, and to the listeners in other parts of the world. As you know, Coach Josh Wood is online, so you can certainly get coached by Coach Josh Wood, anytime, anywhere in the world. So please reach out to him and please share it with others that you find that would find this valuable. Those time poor parents that are looking to get started with that easy step, please share it with them. I'd love you to spread it far and wide. And thank you again for listening. Thanks,
Cool.
mate.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I liked it. It was